If you had been on Fordo Mountain in Iran between 2:40 and 3:05 a.m. on Sunday, lying on your back and looking up at the sky, you would likely have seen a thin crescent moon hanging low in the southeastern corner of the clear sky. With no clouds, you would also have seen the Milky Way, bright and wide. Its only competition the glow from the city of Calm, 20 miles away from your elevated spot on Fordo Ridge at the fringe of the desert. You wouldn't have needed a jacket. The air would probably have felt very dry and warm, even in the small hours of the morning. There would have been a northwest breeze moving through the nearby artemisia shrubs and Persian juniper trees, rustling their leaves and sending their scents over to you. If you had reached out to touch one of the rocks beside you, it would probably still have held the heat from Saturday, when the high had been over 100 degrees. Now and then you might have heard the tek-tek of a western rock nuthatch, or the soft churr of a desert wheat ear, or maybe the squeaks and shuffling of Libyan jerds, common but cute rodents darting between their burrows. There would also probably have been that constant, low-frequency hum from the underground nuclear complex below you, where officials thought 3,000 centrifuges were spinning at 5,000 RPM to enrich uranium. If you had looked left or right, you might have seen the glowing eyes of a long-eared hedgehog in the shrubs, or the green fluorescence of an Arabian fat-tailed scorpion in a crevice, or you might have seen geckos, one fat-tailed, clinging to the vertical rock, another chirping and barking as it paddles across the rocks. You wouldn't have heard it, but you might also have seen the silhouette of a fox bouncing along the ridgeline, ears up, on its way somewhere secret. Or maybe you wouldn't have seen the fox at all, only a white streak slashing overhead, moving at more than 750 miles per hour toward you. Either way, there would then have been the flash, and everything obliterated by light, followed by the loudest sound you'd ever hear, a rippling crack caused by a compression wave moving through the air, the last thing you would ever have heard, in fact, because you would have been rendered deaf by the first 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator, GBU 57B bunker buster bomb splitting the ground beside you. A B-2 bomber traveled from Missouri, burning roughly 28,900 gallons of jet fuel on its way, releasing 282 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, equal to the yearly collective tailpipe emissions of 66 passenger cars in the U.S. Then it dropped the first of 12 bombs. The detonation would release roughly 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide and 5 kilograms of nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas nearly 300 times stronger than carbon dioxide at trapping heat, into the atmosphere. Together, the two gases would give the blast a 100-year climate load equivalent to 2.5 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which would 42 tree seedlings growing for 10 years to offset. You wouldn't have seen it, but immediately after impact, the bomb's 20-foot-long penetrator drill bit would have plowed through 60 feet of limestone and dolomite in less than 0.03 seconds. You could have seen a dull orange flare from the bomb's work further underground, emanating from the hole, but your eyes would probably still be closed, your system still in shock. For about 3 seconds, everything would have then been quiet. Of course, nothing within 100 feet would have had the sensory apparatus to take in this quiet. Like yours, the eardrums of the nearby little owls would have burst, and every reptile or small mammal on the ridge would have been killed outright by the shock wave. The cones and bark of the junipers would have been stripped off, their trunks uprooted and flung alongside the blown-apart darkling beetles and dead geckos. Down the ridge, the Jerd's burrows would have caved in. The Scops owls would have been fatally concussed. There would be that 3 seconds of quiet, though. Maybe you would still be breathing. Maybe your heart would still be beating. After those 3 seconds, superheated rock fragments, having been shot out of the bomb hole by the limestone tailjet of pulverized rock and hot air sent back up the entry shaft, would have ignited the juniper duff all around you, while the cascade of glowing hot rock fragments would have tumbled over your body, supine still on the shuddering ground. It would have been more a shudder than a vibration or shake, more like an animal, struck in the spine and stunned, than the earth disturbed. The stunned mountain would have lurched and at least partially fallen into itself, collapsing. Some, but not all, of the underground made spaces would have collapsed, too, and a cavity would have formed from multiple, convergent cavities created by the destruction. The ground roll vibrations from this collapsing would have been equivalent to a 3.5 magnitude earthquake felt down in Qom, and further along the western rim of Kavir National Park, where Persian onagers, striped hyenas, Indian wolves, goitered gazelles, Persian leopards, and some of the 40 remaining Asiatic cheetahs in the world would have been shaken. The bomb's cascading impact below the surface would have pushed a plume of warm, silk-gray dust 900 feet into the sky, rising and spreading east, confounding a gliding steppe eagle, and confusing the flocks of sandgrouse, who would abort their flight path to feeding grounds and instead circle and recircle the edge of the dust cloud in a fugue state. The wind would still have been coming from the northwest, but it wouldn't just have carried that juniper scent anymore. An acrid, sharp, chemical smell would have joined in, hydrogen fluoride from the breached centrifuge lines, as well as the tang of motor oil and the chalk of eviscerated concrete. The smell would hint at the ecological shadow cast by the chemistry of the explosion itself. When the explosive charge detonated, it would have generated a hot, fast-moving plume that pushed hydrogen chloride, hydrogen fluoride, and other acid gases into the air, held in place by a fine dust of alumina, limestone powder, and perchlorate particles, until the wind and gravity would drop the toxic material over the surrounding slopes and valleys, coating the juniper needles, cutting photosynthesis for weeks and migrating through desert aquifers, blocking iodide uptake in birds and rodents. Together, these acid gases, fluorides, perchlorate, and fine metal dust spread stress well beyond the crater and linger in Fordo's semi-arid food web for months to years. And you, if you had somehow still been alive there on the broken ground, you could have finally cleared the dust from your eyes, blinked once or twice, and looked up again. But the sky will be different now. Every time the ground fell further into itself and the mountain slope shifted, the cloud had grown, covering the stars. No more Milky Way, no more moon. At least not until the wind from the northwest pushes the dust cloud over the ridge and the sky clears again for whatever will come next.